All right. Good afternoon, and welcome to our Guild Wars 2 artist Q&A. First of all, I'm going to have everyone up at the table introduce themselves and talk about a little bit of what they do at ArenaNet, and then I'll ask them a few questions, and then anyone in the audience, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll come up to you, and you can ask a question. So let's start with Kristen.
Hello, my name is Kristen Perry, and I'm a character artist over at ArenaNet. Anything that we do over in the character art department during the day is anything between concept art for creating the look of the armors and NPCs themselves, to actually building them and modeling them, rigging, throwing it in game, and of course, as we all love, bug fixing. So a little of everything. Our department can do NPCs. Our department can do main characters, the player characters, anything that you would do for the different races and so forth. And yeah, that's us.
I'm Matt Barrett, and I'm a concept artist, and I pretty much draw anything that she doesn't draw. So creatures, architecture, environments, pretty much anything that needs to be drawn, I draw it.
Hello, I'm Kekai Kotaki, and I'm the concept art lead at ArenaNet. What I do is basically, I'm in charge of Matt, and then if you look at our concept art RL book, that's basically what I do. And then also my art is featured on top of our trailer, and that's about it. So.
Cool. Okay. Kekai, how long does it take for you to draw those awesome concept art that we see in the trailer, and what kind of programs do you use for that?
It depends on how long it is. Depending on the idea or the concept of it, it could either take half a day to either a week, depending on if the idea is right, or I need to change something, or it's not fitting the design well enough. So that's I can do it in average about a day. I try to crank out something at least once a day. So that's what my personal rule is. And all my stuff is done in Photoshop on the computer with a Wacom tablet. And that's about it.
Okay, Matt, what kind of education do you need to become a concept artist?
Well, obviously you need art education and life drawing and things like that. But you also need, as your education, you need to educate yourself, which is independent study of everything. Anything you're possibly going to be drawing, you're going to be using it. You're going to be basically creating a world. So you need to know how things in the world work and how what they look like. So studying biology, evolution, architecture, just everything.
Kristen, you work a lot on the armor and clothes, and how do you actually come up with a new armor design from scratch? Like, what kind of research process do you go? Like, can you explain about what kind of things you do?
Well, we do work from scratch, but largely we also work from whatever the content team and design needs us to create for a specific location or for a certain type of race or for a certain culture. So I wouldn't say that everything was 100% by scratch, but we say, okay, we need a human, noble, rebel sort of armor, just to use the most generic of terms. For that, I would look into the silhouette first. One of the things that is most recognizable about any character in the game is their silhouette, and this is probably the most overlooked by a lot of artists, is because you're going to be playing something that's probably about that big on the screen. So you need to be able to recognize what you are next to something else that's this big on the screen, and that's going to be largely a silhouette change. So if it was going to be nobility, then that's going to, it's the rebellious sort, then more than likely that's going to say that it's an armor that is probably close to the body, because the rebels would probably be a little less funded, as it were, even if it was for that. So asymmetry would probably describe them really well. And that would also describe something that is a little bit more important. So for that, definitely look at the silhouette. Make sure that things feel tightly and useful to the body. It isn't a lot of rags and rips and things that will break up the overall shape. So once you come up with sort of the overall silhouette feel to it, then start breaking apart what these pieces actually function as. Maybe it's going to be plate armor. Maybe it's going to be leather. Maybe it's going to be tightly woven cloth and so forth. So breaking it down by function and need, and then designing the materials and the use off of that actually really helps in kind of narrowing down. So you're not working from scratch. You just have to, by reason of logic, work down to whittle what is the most appropriate to design those elements of the character. And by that time, you might get everywhere. It's like, oh no, it's thatched reed that is braided together with beads, and you never would have thought about that at the very beginning, had you not thought about what the character needs and what shapes and proportions represent those shapes or represent what that character could be. So it's just sort of a line of deduction.
Kekai, so we've all been seeing this awesome Guild Wars 2 trailer that was released and that we have playing at the booth. You did a lot of art for the trailer. Can you talk about that? How is the process in translating the art from concept and?
Well, it all begins with the script and what we wanted from this trailer, which was we were just gonna put the best stuff out there. We wanted to tell a story, show the characters. So basically, all the pictures and the paintings and the illustrations that I did were all based off of all these the script that we wanted to do for this trailer. Basically, it went through this normal process of a normal concept that I would do. I'll get it reviewed, I'll paint it, I'll redo it until we get some sort of finished product. But then there's also the added work of actually making this ready for actual animation within After Effects, which basically means that I had to cut out all these different elements inside of my paintings so each one could be animated and move. I believe that the highest one was 80 different elements within one illustration. I think that was one of the battle scenes, and there's really a lot of flags that I drew in that one. But each one has to be cut out separately, so that so a little flutter, even though you can't even see it, is fluttering there in the background. And this is all part of the attention to detail that we believe in ArenaNet. This is that we try to strive for to be the best no matter what we do. But other than that, waiting time, it took about a week maybe for one shot to get done, because it would take me about a day or 2 or 3 for me to finish a painting, get all prepped work, and then my buddy of mine, Matthew Altwell, or After Effects guru, he needed a couple days to actually get this stuff, get the shot animated, and so it took about a week for each shot, and plus that, and then we had to wait some more, and then be another 2 or 3 weeks to get all these different elements all together and put together into this wonderful trailer that we put out there. And I'm very happy that it was received so well, and it makes me very happy and glad and relieved that all of my hard work has been appreciated so much. So thank you.
Just a reminder, if anyone in the audience has any questions, please let me know, and I'll come to you with the mic.
This question's for Matt. I was just wondering, of the creatures that you've made, which one's your favorite that you've...
I really don't know. I've just done so many of them, and I don't know.
Choose between your children, it's okay.
I don't know. It's like choosing between children. The Asura were fun. I actually do take a lot of ownership of the Asura. Even though a lot of it was not necessarily I was part of a chain of ideas that led to this Sura, but I did draw the final one that became him, and I kind of, I do like the architecture that I created for them too. They're kind of my baby, so the whole package, the architecture, Sura, their whole culture, I've kind of nurtured that entire cohesive unit, and I'm really proud of that.
They are too.
Okay. Next question from me, actually. What is one of the most challenging parts of doing concept art for games? And this is for everyone up on stage.
I think the most challenging part about doing concept art for games is consistently trying to come up with a good idea that's not too stupid. Because Guild Wars is it's a fantasy game. It's not quite the most traditional fantasy game out there. I mean, but it's not sci-fi. So trying to get these prompts and draw an orc or draw a troll. Trying to come up with an idea that's not like the typical orc or the typical troll. It's kind of hard because there's already a perception of what a orc or what a troll is. So trying to come up with something that has the same level of impact to the player that sees something and think, oh, that fulfills the same role as an orc, but making it cool with edge and with this undefinable Guild Wars quality that we've tried to perfect and cultivate within our company. I think that's a daily challenge for us, to keep on the ball, to keep pushing ourselves to make something better and better, so that people can keep on looking at it and be still stunned at whatever we put out.
A lot of what I do is kind of the really challenging sort of the tricky situations, things that require very specific designs and very specific solutions for complex problems that involve stylization and gameplay and just the overall look of the game. So there's a lot of really architectural interiors especially. Those need to feel real. They need to feel like lived-in architecture, but they also need to accommodate just basic gameplay mechanics and just engine mechanics like camera clearance or just paths through to lead, as part of the game. So there are a lot of really complex problems that are being approached in every single concept piece. It's not just draw a pretty picture and they make it. There's very specific demands for each one of them. And sometimes it can be difficult kind of reining those in. It's like herding cats.
Yeah, I'd have to say that that's probably similar in some of the troubles with drawing characters is trying to come up with something absolutely cool and wonderful within the constraints that we have. Because think about it. All right, you first have to have a specific race. It's probably going to have a cultural influence for a location. It's probably going to have a level influence. So now you have a race that has this sort of culture with this sort of importance level. On top of that, it's going to have the seams, because these character designs, of course, you can swap out armor parts. So you always have a seam here on your wrist. You always have one on waist and so forth. That shape now has to convey that sort of cultural level importance race and work with every other armor piece that's ever been made. It also has to be dyeable. And so whatever, breakup of those shapes for dyeable also has to look good. And then on top of that, try to do something that's never been seen before and absolutely new. And then on top of that, it has to be the latest fashion because we've seen all of that before. So, and you're inventing new designs off on top of that. So once you get to the sort of big juggling act at the very end of trying to come up with something nobody's ever seen before, it's the coolest, most badass thing that you've ever had to begin with, It still fits the location, it fits the race, it fits the importance level. It works with everything else in the game, and it's dyeable. Designing with all of those kind of restrictions on it, and still coming up with something that people want to play the game for. That's always been sort of the challenge in our room, and it's a moving target. And so we always try our best to come up with something that the players will enjoy. But yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, is just doing the job. It's a challenge.
Can you talk about some of the differences, if any, like in your approach to doing art for GW1 versus doing art for Guild Wars 2?
All the new things that we can't talk about. But the also difference is well, now we have normal maps on our characters as well, and so I don't think that's any big secret at this point. We've talked about it before. I know we have. Anyway, and so the big thing is that we're creating high-res sort of, images, because we have access to more resolution on our characters now. And so we're finally able to draw some of the details that you guys never saw before. We did put it in there. It just, by the time it was rendered into the game and brought down to resolution, it just wasn't necessarily apparent when your character's this big on the screen. And so I would say that the difference is now is that we have all access to kinds of all new bells and whistles. And so trying to put that on the character and really making it work together now with all of the materials that we have. It's a really cool thing, and it's nice to be able to have access to all of those details and to be creative with new tools that we haven't had before. But yeah, it's like I said, it's all the same thing. It's just more plates to spin.
I think probably the biggest difference between Guild Wars 2 and... I didn't work on the original Guild Wars 1. I started on about toward the tail end of Factions. So basically the scale of the game that we're working on, this is so much bigger than any of the things we've done before. And just trying to maintain consistency from one end of the project to the other, while not necessarily keep dumbing it down, or because artists develop as they work, and this is like an appreciable chunk of my artistic career that this one game is occupying. So just trying to make sure that the whole time has been up to par. So there's a lot more richness to to Guild Wars 2, and so there's a lot more, like Kristen was saying, a lot of detail, a lot of very fine scale detail, but a lot of opportunity for overworking it. So there's economy involved, but so just probably a little more effort in filling up the space is probably the most pronounced difference. But yeah.
Basically, the main difference between Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2 is that we have to get a lot better for Guild Wars 2 this time.
Good.
I do. Have you been using any of the Guild Wars 1 art as inspiration for the Guild Wars 2 stuff? Notably the armor and stuff. Like, you were talking about how you were progressing armor. Have you been doing any of that, like, as time went on, as the armor shifted and you can identify it? Or?
Well, I don't know if we have anything evolution so directly tied like that. I mean, of course, there is coming up with what is needed for the game and so forth, but no, I don't know that we would necessarily say we have something directly tied. Like I don't know that really applies. It's 250 years later, and so one of the things I suppose with evolution is that we would sort of do is more practical than theoretical. Is that now that we have some extra polys and extra space, we can build out that belt or that really intricate sash or that kind of mechanism that's on the armor that would not have been built and redefined the same way in previous GW1 because we wouldn't have been able to pull it off. So yeah, it's just we have more tools to play with, and so I guess the evolution isn't necessarily a particularly theoretical or a lore thing, but more of a, as far as I'm concerned, a practical thing. Is like, yeah, I can put that belt in there now with that really cool belt buckle, and and make that really stand out and a feature, whereas I wouldn't have the resolution before. So I don't know if that really answers your question like you'd like. I'm sorry.
Is it difficult to design weapons and different items to match the armor?
Sometimes. Depends on the armor or the set. Sometimes it just works out better, and sometimes it's just a big headache.
When you guys are asked to make a piece of art, does the order come in as we needed this set of armor for this race, or does it come in as here's a story, could you storyboard it for us?
It's kind of both, actually. In terms of, depending on where it's coming from, there's either a hardcore list Excel sheet that I'm looking at that has like all these spaces, I gotta go check mark everything. Or it can come directly from the lore side, and it's a story, and it's a blah, 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 and I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. I'm gonna draw that. So it kind of comes from both sides. So, or it's like, something kicks off in our art director's brain, and then he's like, we gotta do this. And then all of a sudden, it's an awesome illustration, and all of a sudden, we're like, okay, so how are we gonna fit that in our story? It works all ways. It doesn't take much for us to like get going on art. I mean, we will take any little bit and expand upon it. So, I hope that answers your question. So.
I remember you previously mentioning that you like putting spikes on armor because they're really badass and things like that. And well, it actually just
I think you're talking to me, right?
Yes, whoever said it, I can't remember. I just when it comes to art in the armors that have things coming off of them, is clipping like a really big issue? And like, have you run into that a lot when it comes to armor making?
You said the C word, that's my department. It is what?
I don't really care about clipping, to be honest.
And he makes our life miserable for that. We have to pull off what he designs. Good golly. So, yeah, there's always an issue with clipping. Unfortunately, we always try to minimize what we can, but given that we're trying for the variety that we have, and you put on your guild cape, you put on all this, you wear, you have to predict that the armor that you're building right now, that like for example, if we were building an armor in Gwen, that armor now has to be piecemealed to work with everything else that was shipped since Prophecies. So you can imagine those pieces, unless you're going to start really getting cliche and being the same kind of shape, is at some point going to clip with some other armor somehow. And so we try, in general, we had some general rules for GW1 and so forth, like the elementalists always, for the hips on down, flowed away from the body. They didn't go up on the waist seam, whereas warriors could go up on the waist seam, because otherwise you would have a coat that comes down like this and a pant that comes down like this, and all of a sudden you'd have this like really bad clipping. So we tried to minimize it by how we put everything together, but unfortunately there's only so much we can do, and we figure, you know what, if it looks really good when it's walking, when it's running, and the major fight, just like a regular sort of movement, then okay, we'll try our best.
Okay, can you each of you talk about one of the most rewarding aspects of doing concept art for games? We talked about challenges. Now let's talk about what you find most rewarding.
Actually, one of my favorite things is actually going in game and seeing what people are wearing. And if I happen to design and build what they're wearing, that's really rewarding. It's like, oh, you did like it. You did, thank goodness. Because it's always you're designing fashion. It's a fad, and it could be in one day or out the next. And so actually seeing that what you're creating is what people are wanting in the game, I would say is probably really rewarding. Other than, the fun of building it. It actually is really fun to do all the details because I'm OCD, really detail oriented. But yeah, seeing that people really enjoy what you're doing, that you love to do as a job, that's really rewarding.
Well, mine's probably somewhat selfish. I mean, I like getting into the game and just seeing it in its element and seeing how well it integrates with the world as a whole and contributes to making it feel like a real immersive environment. And I enjoy when I can share it with people too, but I really just like being in there and kind of seeing it in the flesh. It's really simple, but simple pleasures.
I guess for me, my greatest reward is that I'm actually doing art, and I love to do art. And the fact of the matter is, I get to be part of this great thing that we're trying to do, which is like trying to make a game called Guild Wars and try to make it as the best game ever. Nah, it's the best looking game ever, at least for my part. But yeah, just like being part of something bigger, being like a small part and doing your job well and to the best of your ability, and then trying to push yourself to go further even more. That's quite a rewarding experience for me whenever I like sit down and think about it. So.
Okay, we're gonna start wrapping it up. So if anyone has any other questions, any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you all to our awesome art team up here for taking time out of your day, out of your weekend to talk to us.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And coming up, we've got a book signing at 4:30. So if you'd all like to come back for that, please do. And thanks again to our artist.